wonderful idea. Where did you ever get that idea? No, the monetary system is very vital. If you want to really understand the cause of liberty and the purpose of liberty and sound economic policy, you have to deal with monetary policy. But also something else has happened in the last 4 to 5 years. There's been several of us in Washington trying to fight and thwart off the wars that we've gotten involved in and have a different type of foreign policy. Not a foreign policy of aggression, not a foreign policy of violence, but a foreign policy that is designed with friendship and trade to all nations willing to trade and be friends of this country. But for some reason, there's still a lot of people in Washington that don't quite understand that we are less respected and less liked when we invade countries, bomb countries, occupy countries, tell other people what to do, bribe their dictators. So there's another option. And the American people are hearing about it, and they're understanding it, and that is why now 75% of the American people have come to our viewpoint and said, it's time to come home. Get out of Afghanistan. Bring the troops home. So there is a definite different attitude with economic policy, the Federal Reserve, and also the foreign policy. But there's also an awakening in this country that there has been a systematic attack on our civil liberties, and we have to stand up and say no more. The purpose of government is to protect our liberty, not to destroy our liberties. For instance, the founders were very proud of the Fourth Amendment. They wanted privacy. They didn't want the king and the military coming into their homes without permission and without warrants. And yet today, we're living under a law that says that the Fourth Amendment has very little meaning, and the president and the executive branch can do just about whatever they want. This is the reason I have talked about before it was passed and since it's been passed, and I believe it should be one of the first things that we repeal once in office, and that is getting rid of the Patriot Act. But in all these areas, the American people are waking up, whether it has this attack on our personal civil liberties, whether it's our attack on our First Amendment rights, whether it's the understanding of economics, which is coming around to making more sense, as well as the foreign policy. And this is what is dramatically different. And it's dramatically different on the campuses of this country. We're getting thousands of people coming out. And if you look for the information about what is happening, guess what? The revolution is not being described on TV. Of course it's not! But the good side of it, we have the internet. The scary part of it is that they know it and they're trying to take the internet away from us, and we're not going to let them take the internet from us. But systematically in Washington, D.C., they want to use the internet to control and understand. They just recently built a huge, the biggest thing in the history of the world, and that is a National Security Agency compound out in Utah that can hold more records than any one establishment before. Trillions and trillions of dollars of items on all individuals in this country. They don't need that kind of information. They're supposed to do the opposite. We're supposed to have openness in government and privacy for the people, not attacking the privacy of the people. 4 years ago, 5 years ago, there were quite a few, mostly the economists that were in the Austrian economic camp, were very much aware of the financial bubble and warned about it, and sure enough, it came. Well, the financial bubble comes from the ability of the Fed to monetize debt, which is an encouragement, it's a facilitator, it's a taxer, because if governments can spend endlessly for the benefit of buying votes for the individuals to stay in office, and they never have to worry about paying the bills in the near term, you can tax for a while, there's a limit you can tax, and you can borrow for a while, and then interest rates go up, but then you have this facilitator, this instrument of creating new money. And then we had this benefit of us issuing the reserve currency of the world. I trust it because the dollar used to be as good as gold. But the strange thing happened when the gold was removed in 1971, there still remained a fair amount of trust. Now, they're still under the illusion in Washington that the trust will remain forever. But guess what? The trust isn't there anymore, and it's rapidly disappearing. And this is why this recession is different, and it's worldwide. There's a crisis in Europe. They admit now they're going back into recession. And, of course, we haven't solved our problems because we're all facing the same problem. Government has gotten too big, they fight too many wars, they undermine liberties, write too many regulations, and manipulate the economy too much. So the predictable crises come, and guess what they do in Washington? Congress, the executive branch, the Federal Reserve, they say, oh, we're in trouble now, so what we need to do is spend more money, borrow more money, have more regulations, and let the Fed print money endlessly. How can you solve the problem? You cannot solve the problem of too much spending and too big a government by spending more and making the government bigger. You have to do the opposite.